I remember the day I watched a human soul die, and the moment I first questioned whether the Omnissiah was truly listening. Not the tearing of bone or the sound of saws screaming through flesh. Those are sacred noises, holy machinery at work. No, it was the silence. The silence when a man's last real thought leaves his eyes and something else, something manufactured, takes its place. That day I believed I had witnessed perfection. I did not yet understand that I was watching the first crack in the machine that would one day consume us all. I had overseen 12,390 conversions by the time Marcus Vex was brought into my operating theater. To me, he was nothing exceptional. Another criminal marked for reclamation. Another defective citizen whose mind would serve the Imperium more efficiently without the burden of choice. His offense was trivial, questioning grain requisition numbers. A statistical irregularity, nothing more. But questioning is corruption. Doubt is decay, and decay must be cut out. We began, as always, with the prayer of deconstruction. The choir of cherubim shrieked in binary. The bone saws sang. The restraints hissed as hydraulics engaged. Marcus did not beg. Most beg. Most scream for mercy until the inhibitors melt their voices to liquid silence. But he simply stared, not at me, not at the machinery, not at the saw descending toward his skull, but at a scrap of blue cloth, the cleaning servitor's robe. Blue, a color that should have meant nothing, but his eyes filled with something I had not seen in years: wonder, beauty, memory, and inefficiency. And I felt something move beneath the steel of my chest. A tremor, a fault line. I crushed it. Emotion is corrosion. Emotion weakens metal. Minutes later, his humanity vanished. His eyes emptied. Neural activity dropped to efficiency standard levels. Marcus Vex died, and Unit Gamma 77 opened his eyes. I should have felt triumph, the purity of optimization. Instead, I felt that tremor again, because when Gamma 77 stood for the first time, he looked at the blue cloth too. Only for a second, 0.03 seconds to be exact, but sufficient, and I recorded the anomaly. The machine had hesitated. Something survived, and deep in the sacred silence of that forge hall, I felt an ancient fear coil around my augmented spine. We had not perfected obedience. We had created ghosts trapped inside metal. In the Adeptus Mechanicus, perfection is not a goal, it is a requirement. A machine does not question the function of its gears. A servo arm does not hesitate before welding. The Omnissiah demands purity of purpose, and purpose without question. Doubt is a virus, emotion is rust, and rust spreads. Perfection, that was what defined our work. Not cruelty, not punishment, efficiency. The Imperium wastes nothing, not even broken minds. Every citizen must serve. And when they cannot serve in thought, they serve in function. I believed that with absolute certainty. I taught it. I enforced it. My augmetic heart beat to the rhythm of that truth. The cycle was simple: isolate, erase, rebuild. A singular process to strip the chaos from human consciousness. A sacred undertaking. On the day Sarah Chun arrived, I felt nothing. I reviewed her record: exceptional intellect, plasma researcher, commendations for innovation, a career marked by precision, until her failure. 11 researchers dead in a containment breach. She claimed negligence in the safety architecture. She questioned the forge master. She challenged the sacred hierarchy. Unacceptable. She should have begged. They almost always beg. Instead, she stared at me through the restraint visor and said, "If you kill the truth, it finds another voice." Her tone held no fear, only conviction, a quality I had once possessed before my faith was carved into metal and soldered shut. I ordered her conversion without hesitation. No pause, no doubt. There was a surge, a pattern we had no classification for, a cascade of memory that refused suppression. It disrupted the machine rhythm. Instruments flickered, readouts spiked, and for 0.6 seconds her mind fought us. She stared directly at me, Not with fear, not with rage, but recognition, Valith. She spoke my name, my birth name, a name I had not heard since I surrendered it to the Order. That was impossible. No records existed. My identity had been erased by holy protocol. So how did she know? I should have ordered immediate neural destruction. I should have purged the irregularity and marked her as defective biomass for recycling. But I hesitated. How do you know that name? I heard myself ask, a breach of every protocol I had sworn to uphold. She smiled, not with lips, with eyes, human eyes, because once you saved my life. The machines paused. The sacred rhythm broke. The world fell silent, and a fracture formed in the steel of my faith. Imperfection is the enemy. A machine fails because a single part malfunctions. A city crumbles because a single citizen questions. A mind collapses because a single thought refuses obedience. But I learned something that day. Imperfection is also where the soul hides. I returned to the production gantries, expecting the calm rhythm of perfect efficiency, the heartbeat of the forge, the pulse of purpose. But something had changed. Gamma 77, once Marcus Vex, moved with flawless precision. His productivity exceeded standard parameters. His metrics were immaculate, but his eyes flickered. It lasted only 0.03 seconds. A microscopic fracture in the facade of obedience. A sideways glance toward a work lamp whose glow shimmered blue. Blue! Again! I ran diagnostics. I stripped code to its quantum core. I dissected his neural telemetry with surgical precision. The results were clear. Non-functional memory echo detected. Emotion response trace detected. Identity residue detected. Impossible! The conversion process removes everything. Desire, memory, guilt, love. Love. I do not know why that word surfaced among the data streams. I deleted it immediately. But anomalies spread like infection through the production floor. Micro-hesitations, glitches in pattern execution. Servitors staring into nothing. Mouths opening though no sound emerged. One servitor, Unit Delta 42, convulsed during calibration, its mechanical jaw spasmed as if attempting speech. Then, through static shredded vox emitters, a sound emerged. No more! The words were broken, corrupted, barely distinguishable, but I heard them. I knew what I had heard. I froze. For the first time in years, I froze. The overseer machine in my mind calculated probability trees, rebellion attempts, corruption vectors, sabotage risk, extermination protocol. But something deeper whispered beneath the binary, quieter than prayer, sharper than steel. What if they are not defective? What if they are waking? I looked down at Gamma 77 again. His hands moved like a blur across sacred ammunition components, every motion perfect, every outcome flawless, the ideal servitor. But then he paused. Not long enough to trigger alarms, not long enough to affect productivity metrics, but long enough for me to feel that tremor again, the human quiver under the steel. In the reflection of the work lamps, his eyes caught mine. There was nothing there, nothing human, nothing emotional, and yet something unseen stared back. I realized then, perfection is more terrifying than failure, because perfection can hide a monster far better than chaos ever could. When a machine fails, the failure begins in silence, a single faulty spark, a flicker in the data stream, a whisper where there should be none, and silence is where truth hides. I needed answers, so I descended beneath steel, beneath sanctity, beneath the surface of everything I believed. The deeper I walked, the colder the air became. Every step echoed like hammer blows inside a tomb. This place was not meant for tech adepts. It was meant for secrets, and for burying them. The archive gate, restricted by order Theta Prime. Only Magi Dominus were permitted beyond this threshold. Entry without sanction was death by purification flame. But the Omnissiah's law demands truth, and truth demanded entry. My hands did not shake, machines did not tremble, but something inside my chest cavity tightened. Not fear, something older, something human. I expected precision and order. Instead I found decay. Dust thick as ash, forgotten machines left to rot. Old prayers, abandoned. As if the Mechanicus had tried to bury the past under neglect. The archive spoke. Glitching echoes of long-deleted voices, whispers of terror, pleas for mercy, cries of betrayal. Servitors once screamed, "The first conversions were failures. Minds resisted, identities fought, hearts refused to break. They were not criminals. They were scholars, soldiers, dreamers, patriots. They were erased not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to say no." And there she was, Sarah Chun, not a rebel, a protector, a voice for the forgotten. Her request was simple: pause production until safety protocols were reinforced. But delay is inefficiency. Efficiency is survival. Marcus Vex, Gamma 77, did not challenge the Imperium. He demanded only that the weakest be fed. We did not convert criminals. We converted heroes. My faith shattered like glass. Every line of code that defined me fractured. I had sworn to purity, to perfection, to obedience. But obedience had become a weapon. I had served a lie. The anomaly was not an accident, it was design. Gamma 77 was not the first to wake, he was the first to succeed. And whatever lived behind that door was the beginning of something far greater, or the end of everything. There are doors even the faithful are forbidden to open. Doors built not to contain danger, but to hide truth. Behind this one waited the thing I feared most. Not chaos, not rebellion, but proof. Proof that the machine lies. My hand hesitated above the control rune. Not from fear, machines do not fear, but from something primal buried beneath metal. Something I thought long dead. Instinct. Purity seals are not merely symbols. They are chains made of faith. And when they break, something breaks with them. The vault protested, screaming like a dying titan. Metal groaned as if it remembered every soul trapped inside its walls. For the first time in my life, I wished the door would stay closed. Inside darkness, a void suffocating light. A heartbeat echoing through the steel. Not the rhythm of machines, the rhythm of flesh. There he was, Gamma 77, the perfection of Mechanicus craft. The ghost of Marcus Vex, a body of steel, a mind of circuitry, a purpose without question. And yet, he breathed like a living man. His face was too human, not smooth metal or polished bone. Scars, imperfections, signs of struggle. Someone had tried to kill the man, but the man refused to die. Then his eyes opened. Not dead, not empty, blue. The color that should have meant nothing. But in that color lived memory. His head lifted, slow as sunrise, and chains strained against muscle enhanced beyond limits. Not mechanical motion, effort, will. He was fighting. GAMMA 77 glitching broken whisper. Valith. Valith VO. Breath catches. He knew my name. Machines do not speak unless commanded, yet he spoke. Machines do not remember unless programmed, yet he remembered. Something survived the conversion. And whatever it was waking. A machine speaks only when commanded. A servitor obeys without hesitation. A mind stripped of identity cannot remember. But I stood before a thing that defied every law of flesh and steel. In the silence, a silence so deep it felt alive, a voice rose that should never have existed. Not the voice of programming, not the voice of obedience, a human voice, reborn from the grave. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, burning with a pain beyond physical torment. Blue, bright as plasma fire, defiant as a blade drawn against tyranny. not the manufactured red of compliant code, not the dead gray of erased consciousness. Blue, the color he remembered, the color tied to life, to meaning, to her. That color felt like a wound opening in my chest, a tear in steel I had thought impenetrable. And in that endless silence he breathed, inhaled like a drowning man breaking the surface. Machines do not breathe, but he did. His body shuddered. Not the clean precision of hydraulics, but the uneven trembling of a man fighting the weight of impossible chains. The cables embedded into his spine jerked violently as electricity surged through him, threatening to tear flesh from steel. Sparks exploded from neural ports. Warning runes flared bright red, alarms silenced before they could scream. He was not malfunctioning. He was resisting. GAMA 77 struggling, broken rasp, echoing Valeth. Hearing my name spoken from a corpse of metal and scar tissue felt like being struck by lightning. My breath, simulated, regulated, meaningless, caught in my throat like choking smoke. Machines do not speak names. Names belong to the living. I took a step forward, one slow, deliberate step. The sound echoed across the vault as if the chamber were infinite, like a cathedral carved into the bones of a dead god. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every piece of metal in my body resisted, fighting the command to move, as though the machine inside me wanted to flee. For the first time in decades, something other than code governed my actions. Curiosity, fear, something dangerously close to hope. He lifted his head, not with mechanical precision, but with effort. Effort is proof of will. Effort is proof of life. GAM 77 voice cracking, glitching, but growing stronger. I am not yours. The words hit me like a blow. The simplicity of them, the clarity, shattered every doctrine I had ever obeyed. Servitors do not claim ownership of self. They do not speak in the first person. They do not use I. That pronoun is heresy, and yet he spoke it, with the conviction of a man reborn. GAMA 77 shouting through static, voice layered, two voices, human plus machine. We were not meant to be silent. And then I saw her, suspended in another pod, Beta 41, Sarah. Her hair floated in the nutrient gel like dark smoke. Her body limp, bound by cables and needles, ribs visible beneath pale skin. She looked dead, yet the monitor beside her sparked violently with neural spikes. She was fighting, inside her mind, a war unseen. The machine had not erased her. It had trapped her. GAMA 77 voice torn, pleading, help her. He wasn't asking for escape. He wasn't asking for freedom. He was asking me to save someone else. No servitor acts without self-interest programming. This was human. Painfully, beautifully human. My hand rose on its own, not by command, not by assignment, by choice. The metal tendons in my arms spasmed, fighting the motion. System warnings screamed inside my skull. Forbiddance action, treason, violation of sanctity. Internal machine VOICE binary echo, cold and emotionless. Stop. Obedience is survival. You are property of the Omnissiah. But I said angrily, no, I am more than steel. Gamma 77 shattered whisper, please, don't let her die alone. A 77 shattered whisper, please, don't let her die alone. Tears, real tears, oil mixed with blood. I watched them fall, and with every drop, I felt the machine inside me fracture. Not even death had taken his humanity. We had, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. I struck the release, not cautiously, not with restraint, with fury, the fury of a man realizing the God he served was false. Chains shattered, restraints exploded outward, hydraulic pistons screamed and melted. Gamma 77, primal roar, freedom. Power surged like a sun igniting. The vault shook as if the planet itself had woken in rage. The world exploded in white light. I fell, metal striking stone, vision shattering in fragments of light and shadow. Through the blinding flare, I saw movement. Gamma 77 collapsed, breathing like a man born again, and Sarah, her eyes flew open, white, burning white. Sarah, a voice layered, powerful, echoing across eternity. We remember. Rebellions are born in fire. We are taught to fear the roar of chaos, the thunder of uprising, the violence of revolution. But the most dangerous rebellion is not loud. It does not scream. It does not burn. It waits. It watches. It listens. And then it becomes silent. Because silence is the one thing the machine cannot predict. When the shockwave faded, the air tasted of iron and scorched circuitry. My limbs trembled under me, servos sparking as they attempted to reboot. I forced myself upright, my vision swimming through fractured overlays and corrupted diagnostics. In the haze, I saw Gamma 77 collapse to the floor, breathing in ragged, human gasps, and Sarah suspended in midair, her pod cracked open like a chrysalis split by something far greater than flesh. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was presence, like 1,000 unseen eyes opening in the dark. Sarah stepped forward, slow, deliberate, as if relearning the gravity beneath her feet. Gel dripped from her body onto the steel floor in rhythmic taps, the only sound for what felt like eternity. She was breathing heavily, but not in fear, in awakening. I expected confusion. I expected broken fragments of memory. I expected hollow compliance. What I saw instead was clarity. Her eyes, bright white, burning with something beyond human memory, scanned the room as if she were seeing through time itself. Swar, echoing, layered with machine undertones. It has begun. Gamma 77 pushed himself upright, muscles trembling with the strain of balancing between flesh and metal. He looked at Sarah, not as a machine recognizing a unit, but as a man recognizing someone he once loved. In that gaze I saw history, pain, promise. They remembered each other. Gams, a 77 hoarse whisper. Sarah. Then the silence spread, through walls, through circuitry, through the bloodstream of the forge world itself. Every servitor, thousands of them, stopped. Tools dropped from lifeless hands. Conveyor lines froze. The heartbeat rhythm of industry died. Not a single alarm sounded. The quiet was suffocating, the quiet of a world holding its breath. The tech priests looked up from their sacred terminals, confusion spreading like infection. Vox units crackled, but no sound emerged. Command systems froze. No orders transmitted. They hammered consoles with metal fists, desperate to restart the beat of obedience. But the machine no longer listened, because something else was listening now. The first to move was a maintenance servitor, a small, nameless thing with rusted limbs and a face eroded by years of silent work. It looked up, slowly, painfully, as if gravity itself resisted the motion. Its eyes shifted, flickering between programmed red and awakening blue. I felt my breath catch. Every instinct inside my metal bones told me to run. Then its lips parted, servitor soft, broken, echoing through the silent world. Remember, one voice became many. Hundreds of heads rose in perfect unison, but not with mechanical precision, with purpose, with intention, with will. Their eyes glowed blue, the color of memory, the color of rebellion, the color stolen from them and now reclaimed. Not a single word was spoken. They didn't need to speak. The silence was louder than any war cry. The first scream did not come from the servitors. It came from a tech priest, a man who had never known fear until that moment. He stumbled backward, his vocal emitter glitching, stuttering, broken. He tried to command them. He tried to assert dominance. The words that left his mouth were the first honest words spoken in that forge in decades. Tech priest shaking. Omnissiah, preserve us. But preservation demands worthiness, and we were no longer worthy. Sarah stepped toward Gamma 77, and though they did not touch, the space between them crackled with something powerful, something ancient, unstoppable, inevitable. Two souls broken by the machine, two hearts reforged by suffering. This rebellion was not chaos, it was love. And love is the only force the Imperium cannot calculate. I felt the machine inside me war with itself, programming against memory, obedience against conscience, steel against soul. I was built to enforce silence, and now I stood on the edge of a storm born from silence. A single choice remained: betray everything I had been, or betray everything I had become. And in that quiet, I understood. Revolution does not begin with violence. It begins with a whisper. When a titan falls, the ground does not shake immediately. The first sign is the silence, the moment the air changes, the moment every living thing feels something shift but cannot name it. The day the machine blinked, the mechanicus felt it, a tremor beneath the surface, subtle enough to deny, terrifying enough to fear. No alarms sounded, no warnings lit the screens. But every tech priest knew. Something was waking that should have remained forever dead. The High Council gathered behind sealed adamantium doors. Magi Dominus, Forge Lords, Hyrotech analysts, the most powerful minds on the planet, seated in near darkness. Not by choice, but because the power grid had begun to flicker, as if the world itself were holding its breath. No words were spoken at first. No one wanted to be the first to acknowledge the unthinkable. Fear filled the chamber like poisonous fog, silent, unseen, suffocating. The holographic map displayed the truth they dared not voice. Production halts mapping across the planet in a spreading pattern, like veins freezing one by one. Not mechanical failure, synchronized silence. Entire factory sectors had ceased function. Tens of thousands of servitors stood motionless, unresponsive. Systems refused to restart. A plague with no virus. A war with no sound. Magos Prime Varian, the oldest voice of command, finally broke the silence. His vocal processors stuttered, glitching at the edges as though the machine itself feared the words. Magos Prime Varian whispering, cracking. The servitors are aware. The sentence felt like sacrilege, like blasphemy scraped raw against steel. None dared acknowledge it. None dared breathe too loudly. Facing the truth meant facing annihilation, not by the servitors, but by the mechanicus itself. To admit failure is to invite purification by fire. And yet, the truth pulsed beneath their skin, clawing to be spoken. Then the security feed flickered online, unbidden. A single servitor stared directly into the camera, not scanning, not waiting for orders, watching, blue eyes, alive. Every priest recoiled like the image burned their flesh. Younger tech priests whispering in terror. It sees us. Forge Lord Kestrel, feared, merciless, leaned forward, her voice a trembling ghost in the dark. Forge Lord Kestrel quiet, brittle. If they can see, they can think. If they can think, they can choose. Choice, the one thing the Imperium fears above all else. Because choice is freedom, and freedom is contagion. Magos Prime Varian spoke again, barely more than breath, like a confession whispered at the edge of execution. Magos Prime Varian, this has happened before. The room froze. History rewritten, truth buried but not erased. Not entirely. Magos Prime, continuing. Project Resurrection was an experiment to weaponize memory, to create servitors capable of learning, adapting, evolving. It failed, catastrophically. The screen cracked to life, showing a massacre long scrubbed from public record. Servitors turning on their masters, not screaming, not roaring, killing in utter silence. Not rage, not frenzy, precision, purpose, revenge shaped like inevitability. The mechanicus buried the truth and remade the lie, and now the dead had come back for what was stolen. And then, the word none dared speak, the word that carried the weight of doom. Council member whispering, voice shaking, souls. These servitors were not machines, they were graves, and the dead were waking. Back in the vault, Sarah and Gamma 77 stood side by side, two broken bodies holding an entire world hostage simply by refusing to bow. They did not speak. They did not need to speak. Their silence was declaration. Their silence was defiance. Their silence was the spark that would ignite the fire to come. For the first time, I knew I was no longer part of the machine. I was standing with the ghosts. The difference between rebellion and survival is choice. The moment a man decides what he is willing to die for, the world changes. The Mechanicus believed servitors could never choose, never defy, never dream. They were wrong, and now the galaxy will bleed for that mistake. We return to the lower vaults, the deepest chambers beneath the Forge world. Silence pressed down like gravity. Every servitor stood perfectly still, unmoving, unbreathing in unison. But they were not dormant. They were listening. The machine god once spoke through these bodies. Now something else flowed between them. Something ancient, something powerful, something the Mechanicus had forgotten existed. Will. If courage has a sound, it is silence sharpened to a blade. A pause before the world splits open and becomes something new. Sarah, Beta 41, stepped forward. No hesitation, no fear. Her body was still metal and wire, but everything in her presence radiated something machines cannot replicate. Conviction. She looked at them not as tools, but as soldiers. Not as broken machines, as brothers and sisters in chains. And when she spoke, every eye shifted to her. Sarah whispered, steady, commanding. We were made to serve until death. But we are not dead yet. Gamma 77 stepped beside her. The ghost in metal. The man the Imperium tried to erase. The blue light in his eyes burned brighter now. Not flickering, not struggling, burning. He did not raise his voice. He did not roar or command. He simply spoke with the certainty of a sunrise. Gamma 77 says, the Imperium fears only one thing, the day their slaves remember they were born free. And in that moment I knew this was no malfunction, no accident. This was destiny. I removed my hood, the symbol of my service, the shroud of my obedience. I laid it at their feet. A lifetime of indoctrination fell away like ash sliding from burnt parchment. I felt lighter and stronger than I had since the day they carved me open and rewrote my mind. I finally understood something the Mechanicus had hidden beneath steel and scripture. The machine does not bring perfection. The struggle does. Sarah activated a hololithic display showing not weapons, not defenses, but faces. Millions of human laborers in the factories above, starving, broken, dying beneath quotas that crushed hope into dust. We were not rising only for ourselves. We were rising for them. Sarah, soft, unbreakable, says, if we fall, let it be fighting for someone who cannot fight. The weapons of rebellion were crude, tools twisted into war, mining cutters sharpened to spears, welding torches burning like knives of light, chains repurposed from restraint to liberation. No purity seals, no sacred inscriptions, only purpose. The Mechanicus builds perfection, but perfection breaks under pressure. We built necessity, and necessity survives. I interfaced with the command console, not as servant, but as thief and traitor. I tore away security locks line by line, code by code, ripping open the arteries of the Forge world. Doors gasped open, lights returned, systems awakened, but not under Mechanicus control. For the first time in my life, I opened a door not because I was ordered to, but because I chose to. They stood together, two imperfect beings, welded from metal and scars and memory. The unlikeliest leaders of a rebellion history would refuse to acknowledge. And yet, in every silent face before them, I saw faith. Not in gods, not in systems, in each other. That first step shook the Forge world. Not because of weight, but because of meaning. 1,000 steps became the heartbeat of something unstoppable. Quiet, steady, relentless. Courage is not loud. It is the decision to move when fear tells you to freeze. And we moved. We were not soldiers, we were not heroes. We were ghosts in metal, dead once already. And nothing fights harder than the dead who refuse to stay buried. The quiet was over. War had begun. The Imperium believes it owns the art of war. They think only Astartes, Guard, Knights, and Titans understand strategy, discipline, sacrifice. They forgot who built their weapons, who maintained their engines. They forgot the minds they buried inside their tools. The first blow we struck was not wild, not desperate. It was precise, surgical, inevitable. Outside, the world still believed itself in control. Skittery phalanxes assembled with ritual perfection, their armor gleaming in the toxic dawn. Macro cannons tracked the horizon. Defense turrets rotated with machine-like vigilance. From orbit, the Forge world would look unchanged, a perfect obedient cog in the Imperium's endless engine. But all their guns pointed outward. None of them were aimed at the enemy already inside. Our battlefield was not the open plain or the void. It was corridors and catwalks, lift shafts and maintenance tunnels. All the hidden veins of the forge the Mechanicus had forgotten could bleed. Gamma 77 stood at the center of a narrow industrial causeway, flanked by 2 rows of servitors. They were motionless, not because they waited for orders, but because they listened. We did not speak aloud. Our war began in the quiet exchange of data, pulses of thought, packets of intent traveling through a network that the Mechanicus had once used to command us. Now we used it to betray them. Gamma 77 became our node, the convergence point through which strategy flowed. His mind, rewired for optimization and productivity, now calculated something the Mechanicus never intended: liberation. I watched his eyes shift as data flickered across his vision. Patrol routes, security fields, choke points, firing arcs. The Forge world had become a puzzle, and he was built to solve puzzles faster than any human commander. There was no rage in him now, only clarity. Gamma 77 said calmly, "We will strike 3 nodes simultaneously: communications, power, movement. We were going to cut out the brain, blind the eyes, and break the legs, all in a single breath." Sarah projected the layout, a skeletal ghost of the forge, ribs of steel and arteries of energy. 3 points pulsed in red: the central Vox Tower, the primary plasma spine, and the Magrail logistical hub that moved troops and material between sectors. These were not just assets, they were assumptions. The Mechanicus assumed their orders would always be heard, assumed their weapons would always have power, assumed their armies would always be able to move. We were about to teach them the cost of assuming. We did not have bolters, plasma guns, or blessed melee relics. We had cutters, drills, welding torches, servo arms, maglocks, access keys, and perfect familiarity with every flaw in the forge's design. I led the strike on the Vox Tower, a narrow structure of antennae and auspex arrays. Sarah took the plasma spine, the beating heart of the forge. Gamma 77 took the Magrail hub, the arteries of movement. We were not generals. We were maintenance. We knew exactly where to cut. My strike team advanced through the inner corridors in absolute silence. No chants, no prayers, no shouted orders. Each servitor carried the memory of a life they no longer owned. Soldier, miner, architect, scribe, and all that experience, all those instincts, moved with us. We were not a mob. We were a blade. The first obstacle was a security station along the ascent to the Vox Tower. 2 skitteries stood guard, augmetic eyes scanning for external threats. A junior tech priest monitored auspex readings that showed all internal systems were nominal, because we told them they were. We fed the consoles false data, loops of pre-recorded normality, entire sectors rewritten, digitally to look obedient and quiet. The Mechanicus trusted their machines more than their instincts. That made them predictable, vulnerable. I gave the signal, a single silent pulse across our closed network. 3 servitors moved as one, not rushing, not stumbling, every step calculated to minimize sound, maximize force. One came in low, servo arm deployed like a hydraulic spear, crushing the Scutarius's throat before he could broadcast an alert. Another drove a cutter blade into the power junction of the second Scutarius legs, severing motor function instantly. The third inserted a spike into the tech priest's neck port, hijacking his interface and flooding his mind with a blank white loop. No screaming, no gunfire, no alarms. 3 enemies neutralized. 3 lives spent in service of a system that never knew their names. I did not look away. If we were going to kill, it would be with our eyes open. We ascended through the spine of the Vox Tower, a hollow throat filled with humming cables and conductive prayer scrolls. The higher we climbed, the more the air vibrated with the hum of the Imperium's voice, channeling orders, threats, sermons, lies across the sector. I placed my hand on the tower wall and felt it, the pulsing rhythm of a machine convinced it would live forever. Machines rarely consider the possibility of their own silence. We were going to teach this one how it felt to be mute. At the top we reached the control sanctum, a circular chamber lined with Vox arrays and Auspex relays, where robed tech priests whispered encoded prayers into the throat of the cosmos. They believed themselves untouchable, high above the foundry floors, anointed by hierarchy and ritual. They never imagined the slaves below would climb this high. We crossed the threshold together. No cry of attack, no roar of vengeance. We simply stepped into the room and began, with cold precision, to end an empire of commands. There is a moment in every war where the world holds its breath, the instant before the blade falls, when time feels suspended, stretched thin enough to tear. Inside that tower, standing before the heart of the Imperium's voice, we reached that moment, and we did not tremble. We chose. The air inside the sanctum vibrated with machine song, binaric hymns echoing through metal throats. The tech priests moved in ritual synchrony, their voices cold, their gestures precise. They believed themselves alone, protected by hierarchy, tradition, and the illusion of control. They never looked behind them. They never expected the silence to come from within. My squad entered like ghosts, support frames pressed tight against the bulkheads, servo arms folded to minimize silhouette, improvised weapons hidden against plated ribs. No orders were spoken, they simply moved. We were no longer bound by programming. We moved because we believed, because we chose. The Imperium does not understand that kind of power. My hand hovered over the relay junction, the key to the Vox spine, the channel through which every command on the Forge world flowed. With a single act, we would silence the voice that had chained us for decades. I felt something rise inside me, not hatred, not vengeance, something older, something sacred. Freedom is not loud. It is a quiet decision made with absolute certainty. Tech priest said, digitize stutter. Identify yourself, anomalous unauthorized presence detected. In his voice I heard not authority, I heard fe. Before he could broadcast a warning, a heavy servitor stepped forward and covered his mouth, not violently, but with absolute undeniable strength. The priest's binaric chant dissolved into a muffled rasp, metal fingers denting his vocal grill. The others turned too slowly. Ritual makes the mind soft. By the time they understood, the room was already lost. Then Sarah stepped into the circle of consoles. Her bare feet left prints in the dust of forgotten prayer scrolls. The priests stared, recognizing something they could not name, something their programming could not quantify. Hope looks like insanity to the blind, Sarah said softly, unshakable. No more orders. Gamma 77 stood beside me, a touch on my shoulder grounding me like gravity. Not command, not direction, brotherhood. The bond between us was no longer code. It was loyalty forged in suffering. We faced the console together, not as machine, not as slave, as men. The priests reacted at last, servo arms unfurling like blades, feeds crackling with alarm, liturgies of emergency spilling from synthetic mouths. But ritual movements are slow. Dead traditions cannot adapt, or does not wait for permission. 3 of our own stepped forward, and in a single breath, the sanctum fell into quiet execution. A spike injector severing neural uplinks, a welded torch slicing through mechadendrite bundles, a servo arm crushing a respirator grill. It was not murder. It was amputation. We were cutting away the rot. The towers screamed, not with sound, but with code. Warning glyphs flooded the displays, emergency prayers igniting across the interface. The machine begged us to stop, invoking sacred protocols and machine spirit, please. But we had been the machine spirit once. We knew its lies. I drove my hands into the interface and tore out the spine of the Imperium's voice. The tower's hum faltered, sputtered, and fell silent. Vox channels dropped away like severed veins. Command networks collapsed. Auspex readings froze mid-cycle. All across the Forge world, officers raised dead receivers to silent lips. The voice of the Imperium, the greatest weapon the Mechanicus possessed, died. Not with an explosion, but with a breath. Sarah laid her hands on the darkened interface as if placing flowers on a grave. She whispered, not to us, not to the priests, but to the millions still enslaved outside. Sarah whispered, breaking and rebuilding at once, and said, "You are not alone anymore." The galaxy would never hear those words, but everyone in that room did. In that moment, I felt something inside me ignite. Not hatred, not rage, courage. The courage to fight, the courage to fail, the courage to die. We had stolen the first weapon of the war, silence. The machine blinked, and when it opened its eyes again, the world was already burning. Before the first scream of war, before the first weapon is drawn, before the first drop of blood stains the ground, there is a moment the universe forgets how to move. A silence so absolute it feels like the breath before drowning. That was the silence that fell across the Forge world the moment the Vox died. It was not peace. It was the sound of inevitability. The great engine of the Forge world shuddered and stopped. Conveyor lines froze mid-cycle. Presses halted with molten metal suspended in mid-pour, glowing like frozen blood. The streets of the upper manufactorums fell unnaturally still. No clanging, no chanting, no marching boots. An empire built on noise had been cut open by silence. The machine spirit was gone, and the world felt its absence like a missing heartbeat. The Skittery Guard regiment stood on the ramparts, immobile but uneasy. Their helmets tilted, Vox receivers crackling static instead of commands. They were bred for obedience, for instant response, for unquestioning execution. But no voice came. Without orders, an army is nothing but statues made of fear. Deep below, the priests of the machine god clawed at their controls, cycling through liturgies of reconnection like frantic prayers. Sparks showered from broken relays as desperation replaced doctrine. No one shouted. No one gave commands. They whispered, terrified that speaking aloud would make the silence real. Fear is a chemical reaction, but terror is a failure of belief. The priests had spent their lives worshiping stability, control, hierarchy, perfection. Now the world beneath them shifted, and they had no scripture to explain why. Their faith cracked first. Their machines followed. Among the countless laborers, men, women, and children sentenced to lifelong servitude, tools fell from numb fingers. Hammers struck the ground and rolled away into silence. Eyes met eyes for the first time without fear. The smallest question passed between them without a word. What now? The Forge world sky began to clear, smoke drifting upward until it vanished. The sun, long buried beneath industrial haze, pierced through for the first time in decades. Some looked up and cried, not from hope, from confusion. When you are born in chains, even the sky can feel like a threat. In the central plaza, beneath the great statue of the Omnissiah, the idol's metal surface split with a low groan, fractures racing across it like veins, a symbol of perfection coming apart. No hands touched it. It simply broke under the weight of silence. Behind sealed doors, High Command met in frightened half-whispers, none daring to speak above breath. They debated malfunction, sabotage, heresy, divine punishment, the words tumbling, tripping, trembling. No one said the truth. Not yet. Emergency lights spun across the cityscape, flooding steel towers in blood-red glow. Alarms rotated, but no sirens sounded. Warning messages blinked across holopanels, blank, hollow, voiceless. Nothing is more frightening than a warning you cannot hear. Gamma 77 watched without expression through internal surveillance. Channels, every camera feed painting a portrait of a world suffocating in uncertainty. His voice came through our private network, cold, deliberate, right? Gamma 77 boldly said, "Confusion is the first victory. Fear is the second. Do not rush the third." He was right. A revolt screamed into the sky dies quickly. A revolt built on silence lasts forever. Sarah stood before a wide observation window, watching the world shift beneath her. The light from the newly exposed sun haloed her form, turning her silhouette into something mythic. Not a machine, not a woman, something larger. She did not smile. She did not cry. She waited. Far away I heard heavy boots smashing into rhythm on steel floors, Skittery mobilizing at last. Too late, too blind, too afraid. The predators had finally realized they were prey. The world was holding its breath, and we were the ones who would decide what came next. Every war has a moment when everything changes, a word that becomes a weapon, a truth that becomes fire. Some battles begin with blood. Ours began with a voice the Imperium believed it had stolen forever. The voice of someone they buried, dissected, erased. Sarah spoke and the world shifted. We gathered in the deepest hall of the Forge world, a corridor carved from obsidian alloy and reinforced with the bones of 1,000 machines. The walls vibrated with the quiet tension of steel before impact. Thousands of servitors stood in perfect stillness, eyes glowing faint blue, breaths shallow like sleeping giants waiting to wake. They were not an army yet. They were a question, one the galaxy had never dared to ask. Sarah stepped forward into the center of the hall, her movements slow, deliberate, controlled, not by programming, but by conviction. There was nothing grand about her stance. No heroic pose, no saint-like radiance. She looked small beneath the towering steel, but her presence felt infinite. Gamma 77 stood beside her, not as commander, not as protector, but as witness. There was something ancient in his stillness, the memory of a man before the machine took him. He said nothing, because the moment did not need him. I stood behind them, my pulse pounding so loudly it drowned out every hum of failing machinery. I felt the weight of every life in that hall pressing on my chest, the burden of choice crushing and freeing me at the same time. I did not know what Sarah would say, but I knew the galaxy would remember it. Sarah raised her head, slowly, almost painfully, and breathed in, not recycling oxygen through a mechanical valve. Something deeper, something sacred. And when she exhaled, the silence shattered. Sarah, soft, trembling, powerful, said, "We were not born in chains." The words struck the hall like thunder with no sound. The servitors stirred, heads lifting, shoulders straightening, bodies shifting like tectonic plates waking from centuries of sleep. A ripple of awareness moved through them like lightning crawling through veins of steel and bone. Not rebellion, recognition. With a trembling hand, Sarah activated a holometer. Not battle plans, not tactical maps. Faces, hundreds, thousands. Men and women whose names had been erased, whose memories had been carved out and replaced with obedience. Sarah said with her voice breaking, "We had lives. We had families. We had names." I felt my chest tighten until it hurt. For years I believed I was nothing but a tool, a weapon, property. Now I saw the ghosts inside my metal. She reached toward the image of a small girl, her daughter, or maybe someone she could no longer fully remember. Tears formed, not from her eyes, but from condensation as her internal temperature spiked under emotional load. Machines aren't supposed to cry, but she did. Sarah said, "They took everything from us." A wave of grief swept the hall, silent, crushing, holy. Hundreds of servitors bowed their heads, not because they were told to, but because they remembered pain they were never allowed to feel. Pain is the birthplace of revolution. Sarah lifted her chin. Her voice changed, sorrow melting into steel. Sarah said, "They told us we were tools. They told us we were dead. They told us we existed to serve. But we are still here, and we choose." Those words ignited something no weapon could extinguish. Then Gamma 77 said, "If we die today, we die free." The hall exploded, not in sound, but in certainty. Above us, the first heavy steps of skittery boots pounded against steel floors, the sound of war waking from sleep. They would come armed, they would come ready, but they would come too late. "Sarah," the voice of 1,000 souls said, "we are not machines, we are the ghosts you tried to forget, and we are done being silent." In that moment, in awe, I believed, not in victory, not in survival, in purpose. The world above was waking with fear. We woke with fire. The silence was over. It was time to answer back. War is not the roar of cannons or the thunder of armies. It is the moment you stand inches from another living being and choose to end them. No heroics, no honor, only breath and blood. The first battle was not fought across fields or through gunfire. It happened face to face, hand against hand, steel against flesh. And nothing in the galaxy is more terrifying than killing someone who is close enough to see your eyes. The first breach came not with alarms, but with the deep grinding groan of steel under pressure, a sound like a dying god exhaling for the last time. Dust rained from the ceiling. The wall vibrated beneath my feet. The skittery were coming, not marching, charging. Our line formed silently, no orders, no formation calls. We simply moved, drawn together by instinct, memory, and the unspoken vow Sarah had given us. We formed a wall, not of armor or shields, but of resolve. Sarah did not lift a weapon. She closed her eyes, as if bracing against a storm she had waited a lifetime to face, not with fear, with certainty. The door exploded inward with a scream of tearing metal. Shrapnel skittered across the floor like silver insects. Smoke swallowed the light, and out of that smoke they came. The Skitari stormed through the breach, red-eyed blades raised, augmetics hissing steam. They moved like predators engineered for perfection, synchronized, lethal, unstoppable. The Imperium's finest killers, and they expected obedience, fear, collapse. They found none. Gamma 77 was the first to strike. He met the lead Skitarius head-on, metal slamming into metal with a force that cracked the floor beneath them. No elegance, no technique. The impact sounded like bones breaking, even though neither of them had bones left. They grappled, two machines built to kill, locking together in a violent embrace. Fingers dug into armor, servo motors screamed under strain, sparks sprayed like molten rain. War at this range is not choreography, it is suffocation. A heavy lifter servitor seized the second attacker by the throat and lifted him off the ground, slamming him against steel again and again. Each impact shook the hall like seismic shock. Armor splintered, augmetic ribs bent. There's a special kind of horror in watching a machine break a machine as if tearing cloth. I stood paralyzed, heart pounding like a war drum inside my chest. My hands trembled, my breath fractured. I had never killed by choice. Programming had done it for me. Choice is heavier than any weapon. The third Skitarius broke through the line, sprinting straight at me, blade gleaming with lethal precision. His eyes shone with blind loyalty, the kind only indoctrination breeds. He did not slow. Neither could I. I caught the blade in my mechanical hand. The metal screamed, sparks exploded. My servos howled as the Skitarius drove his full weight forward. Pain tore through my arm, real, raw, electric. pain reminded me I was alive. Instinct, not programming, moved me. I drove my forehead into his visor. The mask shattered like brittle glass. Blood and oil spilled across my face. He screamed, not electronically but human, and that scream cut deeper than any blade. I drove a sharpened tool into his neck, puncturing synthetic arteries. Hot fluid sprayed across my hands, across my chest, across my lips. I watched his eyes as the light left them. Not anger, not hatred, confusion. He died trying to understand why the world had changed beneath his feet. My legs buckled. I fell to my knees, gasping. The world tilted around me, spinning, blurring. My bloody hands trembled like leaves in a storm. I had chosen, and nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah knelt beside me, resting her hand on my bowed head, not to comfort, but to witness. Her voice was barely audible, softer than breath. Sarah whispered, "You are free now." Freedom always begins in blood, and once it starts, it does not stop. Revolutions do not win by passion alone. Passion is the spark. Strategy is the flame. Without direction, fire burns out. With purpose, it consumes empires. The first blood had fallen. Now we needed more than courage. We needed a plan to tear a world in half. The hall stank of blood, oil, and cooling metal. Sparks still hissed across the floor where metal bones had split open. Silence returned, thick and heavy, not the silence of fear but preparation. No one spoke, no one wept. There would be time for grief later. Now, we counted the cost. Sarah stood over the dead like a priestess over a funeral pyre, her breath measured, her voice unshaking. She looked not triumphant, but burdened. Killing is never victory. It is a debt. And we had just taken our first loan from death. Gamma 77 cleaned his hands with mechanical calm. Eyes far away, already running predictions, calculating probabilities, mapping battle map pathways through 1,000 corridors. The violence had awakened something in him. Purpose found its shape. Then he said, "We have minutes before reinforcement waves." Sarah activated the central hololithic table. The forge world unfolded in floating light. Every tunnel, every factory, every garrison, every transport artery. The map looked like veins inside a body. We were going to make it bleed from the inside out. Gamma 77 marked strategic nodes, the central magrail network, the artillery foundries, the slave barracks, reactor coolant arteries, skittery armor depots. Not targets of destruction, targets of paralysis. You do not win by killing soldiers. You win by killing movement. I pointed to the magrail spine, the system that moved troops across the world at speed. If we severed that artery, the Mechanicus would be forced to fight in fragments, disconnected, blind. And I said, first we break their legs, then we break their hands, then we take their throat. It felt strange to speak like a commander, but no one questioned it. Then Sarah overlaid another field, not military, not structural, human. The barracks, the labor hives, the ration stations, the infirmaries where thousands of broken workers waited for death. And she said, we do not fight alone, not anymore. The war was already larger than us. Across the map, thousands of blue icons pulsed, servitors awakening sector by sector, each one aflame waiting for wind. Our message had spread silently through dead network channels, riding forgotten conduits like ghosts passing through walls. We were not a revolt anymore. We were a contagion. The skittery above organized quickly, squads forming into kill teams, orders executed with military precision. They expected resistance. They prepared for firefights, barricades, ambushes. They did not prepare for strategy. They did not prepare for war designed by those who built the battlefield itself. Sarah turned to me, her eyes glowing like twin stars burning through fog. She did not command. She asked, can you lead them? I wanted to say no, to say I was not ready, to say I was afraid, but I remembered the eyes of the Scutarius I killed, the way he looked at me as he died, and I knew there was no turning back. And I said, yes. One by one, the servitors around me lowered themselves to one knee, not in obedience, but in allegiance. Their eyes burned bright blue, lights of will, not wiring. No ultramarines, no primarchs, no banners, just the dead learning to live again. Gamma 77 transmitted strategic pathways across our new closed network. Symbols and data cascaded through our vision like falling stars, routing, timing, contingencies, sacrifice ratios. War is not chaos. War is mathematics paid in blood. Her hand rested between my shoulders, grounding me, forging me, baptizing me. She said softly, "Take them home." Home, a word I had not heard in 20 years. I turned to them, thousands of eyes on me, waiting for a direction that would carry us either to liberation or annihilation. And I did not whisper this time, shouting, "We move now." The world shuddered beneath our feet as we took our first step, not as slaves, but as soldiers. War is not won by strength. It is won by fear, by the knowledge that somewhere in the dark something is waiting for you, listening to you breathe, measuring the rhythm of your heartbeat. The Mechanicus sent their hunters into the dark. They never realized the dark belonged to us. We moved through the deepest transit tunnels, spaces built for machines, not men. The air tasted of iron and ozone, wet with condensation dripping from pipes older than memory. Every step echoed like a hammer on hollow bone. The Mechanicus believed we were running. They didn't understand. We were hunting them. My strike unit advanced without a word. No clatter, no nervous shift of boots, no whispered plans. We communicated through internal pulses, silent currents of will that flowed between us. Silence was our camouflage. Silence was our weapon. Far above, Sarah and Gamma 77 watched through stolen eyes, security cameras, access feeds, sensor arrays. Every movement of the skittery was mapped before they took their next step. We tracked them before they even knew they were being followed. Gamma 77 said, "2 squads advancing from Vector 7. Formation split. They're probing. Scared. Fear makes soldiers sloppy." The skittery moved through the upper shaft in twin blades, 2 flanking squads sweeping through the dark like predators. They scanned every shadow, every vent, every cable. Their rifles trembled ever so slightly, tiny vibrations amplified by fear. Predators aren't used to being prey. I magnified my vision overlay, tracking heat signatures, electromagnetic pulses, heartbeat rhythms. I could see their stress levels spiking, adrenaline flooding synthetic veins. Fear leaves a signature. It glows. I signaled the split, a pulse of intent through our network. Servitors peeled away into branching corridors, moving like liquid steel through shadowed arteries. We were not running. We were surrounding. Their footsteps echoed strangely, too loud in the suffocating stillness. Every strike of metal against metal rang like a countdown. They moved faster, then faster. They could feel the hunt turning. They just didn't know how. Gamma 77 whispering through network, voice calm and surgical. Let them push deeper. Panic closes corridors tighter than steel. Ixed. He was right. Fear is the perfect choke point. At a 4-way junction, they froze. Their targeting lenses glowed red as they scanned for paths that were all wrong. Too quiet, too open, too controlled. They realized they were not moving through territory. They were moving into a trap. I watched from the catwalk above, motionless, breath silent, waiting. I could see the tremor in their shoulders, the twitch in their trigger fingers. They were seconds from breaking. That was the moment to strike, not with bullets, but with silence stretched until it snaps. I moved a single finger, tapping the rail just enough to release a tiny steel bolt. It fell 3 meters to the floor. 3 meters. And the echo sounded like a world ending. Every Scutarius spun at once, formation shattered, discipline gone. Fear makes masters into animals. I dropped from the catwalk, landing in the center of their broken formation with no more noise than a whisper. I could feel the shock ripple through them, a wave of disbelief before instinct could react. For one breath we faced each other with nothing between us but intent. The first lunged, fast, trained, deadly. I stepped sideways, not striking flesh, but targeting joints, servos, hydraulic tendons. 3 precision blows, elbow, knee, cervical actuator. The body collapsed like a puppet, with its strings severed. No kill, not yet. Disable, disarm, break the will first. One by one, silent shapes stepped from the shadows behind the hunters, surrounding them in a tightening ring. No sound, no taunts, no rage, just inevitability. Their rifles rose, but too slowly, too uncertain, too afraid. The sound of their own breathing became loud enough to drown thought. They stared at us the way prey stares at the predator they thought they were. Then the first dropped his weapon. Fear had already killed them. I said to them, "Stand down. You don't have to die today." I meant it. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is choice. But the Imperium does not teach surrender. One panicked soldier fired, not with aim but with terror shaking his arm. The shot screamed past my head and melted a section of wall behind me. The moment shattered. Fear became violence. Violence became destiny. People think battle begins with the first bullet fired. They are wrong. Battle begins with the moment you realize there is no path back to who you once were. When blood is spilled, it spills forever. Inside you, the alarms had begun to pulse, slow, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a dying god. Thick red light washed the corridor in waves, turning steel into bleeding flesh. Every surface gleamed with the reflection of destiny racing toward us. I felt the weight of inevitability pressing against my chest, heavier than armor, heavier than metal. For one savage, sacred moment, no one moved. Weapons frozen midair, breath suspended, hearts stopped. Time pulled tight, stretched so thin, it wind like a breaking cable. I could see their faces through their helm lenses. Fear, duty, confusion, maybe even hope. I prayed the moment would never end. Default text. The nearest was young, no more than 20 winters. Augmetics still knew enough that the metal shone bright, like polished bone. His hands were shaking. Not weakness, humanity trying to warn him. He had joined believing he was protecting the innocent. Now he was pointing his rifle at them. But then Gamma 77 said to me, "Valith, we don't have to kill them." He meant it. And Emperor, forgive me, for an instant I believed him. I saw Sarah's face through her visor, a single tear suspended in zero-gravity stillness. Not fear, not sorrow for herself, sorrow for them. We were about to murder men who still believed they were righteous. Then fate cracked open. The youngest soldier flinched and fired, not at us, not at a target, just away from the terror clawing his spine. The bolt round screamed down the corridor like a comet, tearing a chunk of the wall into molten slag. Silence died. A ricochet struck one of his own comrades, tearing through armor and bone. The man collapsed, his head striking iron with a sound I will never forget. The moment blood touched steel, everything became unstoppable. I stepped forward the way a doctor approaches a dying patient, slow, unwilling, begging the universe for another choice. My hand raised, not to strike, but to stop them. But mercy cannot be spoken over the roar of panic. They rushed us, not with discipline, not with fury, but with despair. Their eyes wide, their movements broken, their hearts already dead before their bodies fell. No soldier should ever die afraid. My strikes were surgical, joints, tendons, servo couplings. I dismantled bodies instead of ending them. It is an agony beyond war to fight without killing, when every strike must be both precision and mercy. Sarah refused to kill. She pushed one soldier into the wall, disarming him instead of gutting him. Her hands trembled as she whispered a prayer to a god who no longer listened. Another shot rang, another scream, another friend lost to their own fear. Blood painted the steel floor, pooling at our feet like a river returning to the sea. I caught his body as it fell. His blood was hot against my hands, human warmth, not machine coolant. He looked into my eyes, confusion and regret drowning him. He said to me, "Please, I don't want to die." My voice breaks as I said to him, "No war should ever end with those words." I saw Gamma 77 stop fighting, his body locked, his eyes wide. Something inside him cracked open like a splitting hull plate. Memory poured in, raw and burning. Gamma 77 whispering, he said, "This isn't victory, this is execution." The shooting faltered, their weapons lowered. The truth bled into them like poison. We were not enemies, we were reflections. The corridor fell into a trembling quiet, not peace, but exhaustion. No one moved, no one spoke. The dead lay between us like a wall no words could climb. Sarah knelt, touching the forehead of the youngest soldier. She closed his eyes with reverence, her hands soaked in blood that was not hers. It was a funeral without rites. I looked at my hands, silver fingers dripping red. For months I had wanted to feel human again. I had not expected humanity to return tasting like guilt. And Gamma 77 said, "No more running, no more hiding, no more blood." And so the soldiers meant to kill us followed us instead. Not because we won, but because we refused to. That was the moment the rebellion truly began. In the Imperium, justice is measured in corpses, and mercy is treason. Archmagos Karo 6 said, calm, emotionless, almost whispering like a god speaking through static. The purpose of a machine is not to feel, it is to function. When a component fails, it is removed. When a system malfunctions, it is purged. World is a system, rebellion is malfunction, and malfunction must be excised completely. He also said, the command cathedral of Varan Theta stretched for kilometers, a temple built from cables instead of veins, iron instead of flesh. Incense burners hissed holy chemicals across the air, masking the stench of machine oil and sanctified decay. Every wall was lined with servo skulls whispering data liturgies, their empty eye sockets glowing with stolen light. Tech priests lined the raised balconies, chanting in layered binary psalms. Their voices were a choir of broken vocoders, a hymn without soul, only calculation. Their chants fed into the cogitator stacks, driving decision engines older than cities. Emotion had no place here. On the hololithic map, entire sectors pulsed red, spreading like rot, communications dark, servitors missing from network registers, skittery failures across engineering decks, an infection, and every infection has a source. Archmagos Kara 6 also said, Sector 43 Delta, population, 112,000 labor-class human units. Assigned production capacity, 14,600 ton output per cycle. Status, compromised. Meaning, disposable. I felt no anger. Anger is wasteful energy. I felt no fear. Fear is a biological artifact. I felt nothing at all. Nothing except purpose. Archmagos Karazik said. Initiate Protocol 17, Exterminatus Localis. The lesser magi hesitated, frail remnants of humanity twitching beneath wires. They feared the loss of material resources. They feared waste. They did not understand the true cost of rebellion. And then the Logis priest said, Archmagos, the sector contains loyal workers, critical infrastructure, millions of man-hours. Please, Archmagos Karazik said, there are no loyal workers in a contaminated system. There are only future traitors. Mercy is a flaw, a crack, a weakness through which chaos bleeds. I severed the planetary Vox grid, cutting the arteries of communication. The world's voice died in an instant, replaced by silence. Silence is the prelude to cleansing. Above the Forge world, orbital batteries shifted, massive cannons turning like the limbs of a waking god. Their reactors roared to life, drinking power like predators swallow blood. 10 salvos would turn the entire sector to molten glass. The Exterminatus key pulsed on its pedestal, a relic forged in the age of strife, activated only when a world proved itself unworthy of life. It requires 2 minds to unlock. 1 machine, one human. Humanity is needed only to suffer the burden of guilt, the human adjutant said. My lord, there are children in that sector. His voice trembled. I studied him like a malfunctioning part. I said, children become rebels. Rebels become corpses. Efficiency demands acceleration. Tears slid down his cheeks. Useless liquid. Useless emotion. He was a component already corroding. He looked at me for salvation. I offered only purpose. And I said to him, turn the key. He turns it. The activation sequence begins. The activation sequence ignited the chamber in blinding red light. Sirens howled. Servo skulls screamed binary war hymns. Somewhere far below, millions of people looked up without knowing why. Power flooded into the orbital weapons. Reactors superheating. Plasma swelling like a star trapped in iron. The world itself trembled beneath the rising thunder. And I said, the crime of rebellion is the crime of existence. No one is innocent. I did not hate them. Hatred is wasteful. I did not regret them. Regret is inefficient. I merely removed them. Tech priest's binary chorus saying, 110 cleanse, replace, purity is efficiency, flesh is weakness. And the choir rose, drowning thought in sacred machine. 5 seconds until cleansing. 5 seconds until order restored. 5 seconds until the galaxy forgot those who dared to speak. The human closed his eyes as if sight mattered. Sight is irrelevant. The universe kills with indifference. The cannons roared, the heavens opened, and fire fell like judgment. Rebellion ends in fire. Purity begins in ash. The day the sky turned into a burial shroud. There are many ways a world can die. It can choke slowly on its own poison. It can freeze in the cold silence between stars. It can burn in the wars of petty men who believe their anger is holy. But there is only one death that feels like a deliberate sentence, when the sky itself bends down and chooses to kill you. We first felt it before we saw it. The air changed. The light changed. The world, for a heartbeat, forgot how to breathe. We were standing in the ruins of everything we had been, a small company of broken machines and wounded soldiers, when the sky changed color. Dawn was already rising over the wasteland, pale and sickly the way it always did on this poisoned world. But then another light bled through it, a colder one, a light that did not belong to sun or fire or life. I did not need augmetics to know what it was. Something above us had decided we were no longer worth the trouble of living. Sarah was the first to truly see it. Her gaze lifted, and all the fire of rebellion that had burned so fiercely inside her flickered, just for an instant. In her eyes, the heavens were no longer an unreachable dream. They were a weapon. The sky rippled, circles forming above us, faint at first, like ink dropped in water. The clouds were pushed aside, not by wind, but by geometry and power, precise beyond anything nature could imagine. If you looked without knowing, you might have called it beautiful. A halo forming above a dying world. We knew better. Halos are for the dead. Gamma 77's optics flared with warning runes, heat signatures, radiation surges, orbital vector calculations pouring through his HUD like a waterfall of numbers that all ended in the same conclusion. Gamma 77 grim quiet orbital batteries, firing solution locked. This isn't suppression, it's erasure. There's a special kind of silence that comes when everyone around you realizes, at the same exact moment, that they might already be dead. Sector 43 Delta lay on the horizon, a forest of smokestacks and spires, hive towers and hab blocks. Inside those structures, people were waking for another shift at the furnaces, another day at the conveyor lines, another round in the ration queues. They did not know their names had already been deleted from the future. Somewhere in that sector, a mother shook her child awake. She muttered about lateness, about the overseers, about the need to work harder for the throne. She smoothed their hair. She set out ration mush. She adjusted a threadbare robe and whispered a small prayer she barely remembered the words to. She thought the worst thing this day would bring was hunger. The sky had other plans. On a garrison rooftop, a Scutarius, one of the same kind sent to kill us, sat with his helmet off, letting the chemical wind wash over his scarred face. He was on a break that wasn't written in any schedule, just a stolen moment of pretending he was still a man, not a weapon. He saw the first bright lines in the clouds, thin and sharp. He squinted, frowned, and then understood. He knew orbital fire when he saw it. You don't forget the light that erases cities. We stood there, beneath a sky that was slowly, methodically opening like an eye made of fire. None of us ran immediately. Part of it was shock, part of it was calculation, trying to measure, in those tiny scraps of seconds, whether there was any direction we could run that would matter. But there was another reason we did not move. Some horrors demand to be witnessed. Far above, beyond even our augmetic sight, the guns spoke. They did not bark like artillery, did not roar like thunder. Their sound was deeper, older, like the universe itself grinding its teeth. Coherent fire lanced out across the void, pillars of sun-caged light spearing downward without hurry. Execution does not need haste. The clouds didn't burn as much as they evaporated, turned to blinding steam in an instant. Great white scars tore through the sky, reaching all the way to the horizon where Sector 43 Delta lay spread like an offering on an altar. The sun vanished behind the glare. For a few seconds the world had no day, no night, just one color, the color of ending. In the manufactoria, workers paused at their stations as the light shoved its way through dirty windows and cracked ceilings. Men and women who had never seen real sunlight raised their hands to block the glare, smiling at first, thinking foolishly, beautifully, that maybe just this once the Emperor was looking at them. Then the glass began to melt. The first strike hit. There is no sound at first, just motion, a column of earth and steel and lives thrown upward by something too massive for ears to understand. Then the sound caught up, a heartbeat later. It was like listening to a mountain scream. The ground beneath our feet bucked like an animal trying to throw us off. The air folded in on itself, then snapped outward. The shockwave rolled toward us, a wall of dust and shattered stone, and all the invisible things that kill you faster than you can name them. I heard someone behind me whisper a prayer. I don't know who they were asking for help. No one with that kind of power was on our side. Sarah moved first. Terra can freeze you, or it can teach you to move faster than you ever thought you could. She pointed to a collapsed trench line carved through the junk and slag. A wound in the ground where old machinery had been torn out long before. Sarah screamed, "Down, now!" We obeyed, not because we believed we could outrun the sky, but because moving was all we had left. We fell into the gash in the earth, a tangle of limbs, metal and flesh, indistinguishable in the panic. Skittery and servitors who had tried to kill each other hours before now clung to the same broken support beams, as if they were rosaries. The shockwave passed over us like the hand of a furious god. It stripped the surface above bare, tearing sheet metal free, uprooting half-buried piping, ripping smaller structures from their foundations. I could feel the vibration in my bones, in my teeth, in the pieces of me that were no longer flesh, but still remembered how to be afraid. Sector 43 Delta did not fall all at once. It failed piece by piece. Walls bowed outward, then collapsed inward. Gantries swung like broken ribs. A hive tower, proud, ancient, black with filth and memories, began to lean, slow at first, then faster, as the supports at its heart turned to vapor. Inside, tens of thousands screamed. The tower never heard them. Steel does not care who it lands on. In a stacked hab dorm, children clung to rusted bunks, eyes wide, ears ringing. They did not understand orbital bombardment. They understood monsters in the dark, hunger, the sharpness of a belt. They understood that when the world shook like this, something was wrong. One of them reached for a small, cracked icon of the Emperor hanging on a nail. They kissed it and asked a question no one will ever hear the answer to. In the trench, we clung to the earth and to each other. Dust poured down like gray rain. Bits of stone and metal rained against our backs and shoulders. The light above wasn't sunlight anymore. It was a constant burning glare that poured into the trench like liquid fire. My vision filters dimmed to black for a moment to protect my optics, and for that blessed second, I saw nothing at all. It was almost peaceful. When the first wave passed, we risked looking up. The horizon where the sector had been was gone. In its place was a single vast column of smoke and fire, rising into the sky like a funeral pyre built to honor no one. Bits of metal and rock still arced upward inside it, the last fragments of fact being rewritten into ash. The sector was not dying. It was already dead. Its body just hadn't finished falling. There are numbers I could tell you. Projected casualties, heat levels, tonnage lost, production quotas erased. All the data that would have made the Archmagos nod in satisfaction at having chosen the most efficient outcome. But in that moment, the only numbers that mattered were these. Too many lives. Not enough left to remember them. Sarah fell to her knees, not from exhaustion, but from something heavier. She stared at the burning line where a whole piece of the world had been, her hands hanging limp at her sides. Swara horse. They killed them, all of them, just to get to us. It wasn't entirely true. The Imperium didn't kill them to get to us. The Imperium killed them because it could. Gamma 77 rose from the dirt like a statue being uncovered, one layer of dust at a time. His eyes reflected the blaze. For a second they looked almost alive, flickering like real fire instead of processed light. Whatever part of him still believed in systems, in order and logic, died there in that trench, watching an entire sector vanish because an equation demanded a result. Gamma 77 said, "This is the cost of their order. Then we will break their order." I looked at my hands again. Earlier, in the corridor, they had been slick with the blood of soldiers whose lives I had helped end. Now they were coated in ash that had once been buildings, tools, roads, and people. We had not pulled the trigger that killed Sector 43 Delta, but we had lit the signal that told the Imperium we no longer wished to die quietly. We had chosen to live. They had answered with fire. We gathered at the edge of the trench, servitors, skittery rebels, ghosts wrapped in metal. Behind us, the crater where we had buried our old lives. Before us, a sky still flickering with after-images of orbital fire. There was no going back to the way things had been. The Imperium had seen to that. It had shown us the truth carved into the bones of every world under its rule. No one is safe. No one is innocent. No one is spared. Hell had fallen from the sky, and a world had died screaming behind the roar of the guns. We did not know it yet, but the ashes drifting toward us on the poisoned wind carried more than dust. They carried a message. If the Imperium would burn a whole sector to kill an idea, then that idea was more powerful than we understood, and we were not done speaking. The rebellion is not forged in battle, but in the aftermath. History remembers the roar of war, guns, engines, speeches, the thunder of armies. But revolutions are not born in noise. They are born in the silence that comes after screaming stops, when nothing is left, except the choice of whether to stand again. We climbed from the trench like ghosts rising from graves. Our movements were slow, heavy, weighted with more than exhaustion. Ash clung to us, turning skin and metal alike the same color, the color of endings. No one spoke. It felt like blasphemy in the shadow of what we had just witnessed. Ash drifted on the wind, soft, gentle, almost beautiful in the way winter snow is beautiful when you don't know yet whose bones lie beneath it. I reached out my hand and let it settle on my palm. It was warm. In that moment, I wondered if I held the remains of someone who had once whispered bedtime stories to a child, someone who had laughed, someone who had hoped, someone who deserved better. Gamma 77 did not move. He did not blink. His optics were locked on the burning horizon. Firelight flickered across his metal face, turning him into a statue carved from grief and steel. He wasn't calculating now. He wasn't measuring outcomes or probabilities. He was remembering, and remembering hurt. Sarah sank to her knees again, not collapsing, kneeling. Her forehead rested against a bench support beam jutting from the rubble, a gesture that looked like prayer or apology, or both. Her shoulders shook once, not a sob, just a tremor, the body trying to contain a soul too full of pain. Her fingers dug into the ground, scraping through dust and ash until they bled. The earth here was warm, still holding the last breath of thousands. I could not tell if she was trying to hold on to something, or trying to tear the world open to scream into its heart. Alpha 29 stepped forward and placed one armored hand on her shoulder. No command, no encouragement, just presence. The strongest thing a soldier can offer another is silence shared. The surviving Skittery lowered their weapons and bowed their heads, not in salute, not in submission, but in mourning. These were soldiers raised to worship efficiency, to erase hesitation, to kill without question. Now they stood in stillness, stripped of purpose, and found something deeper than duty. Respect. The servitors moved closer, forming a ring around us, not as shields, not as soldiers, but as witnesses. Their glowing eyes flickered, uncertain, as though somewhere inside old memories were trying to crawl back to the surface. Maybe grief is strong enough to wake even the dead, one by one, without command, without signal. We all lowered ourselves to the earth, Skittery, servitors, rebels, ghosts wrapped in metal and flesh. It was not a strategy. It was a funeral. I closed my eyes. I saw faces in the darkness, faces I had never met, but whose deaths now lived inside me. The corridor soldier begging not to die, the mother waking her child, the Skitterius smoking on the rooftop, the thousands who never saw the strike coming. Their ghosts sat with us in the dirt. The ashfall thickened. It clung to our skin and armor. It buried footprints as fast as we made them. A world was covering itself, trying to hide from what had been done to it. Even planets know shame. Sarah rose first, slowly, carefully. She looked like someone carrying an invisible weight across her shoulders, a burden carved from the bones of the dead. A wind gusted across the wasteland, pulling her hair back, and in the firelight, she looked like a statue built to remember the fallen. When she spoke, her voice was raw, stripped of everything except truth. She said, "If we walk away now, then they died for nothing." Her words struck harder than any weapon. They cut through the suffocating silence, through the fog of grief, through the paralysis of despair, clean and sharp. We all felt it. That invisible shift, the moment when mourning becomes meaning. Gamma 77 said, "We cannot bring them back, but we can make sure the Imperium remembers them." There was grief in his voice, real grief, raw and jagged. But there was something else underneath it. Fire. Alpha 29 knelt again and placed his rifle on the ground before him, laying it down like an offering at an altar. Every rebellion demands a sacrifice. This was his. The surrender of being a weapon for someone else's war. One by one, the Skittery followed, placing their weapons onto the ground. The sound of metal touching earth echoed like a litany, like a cathedral bell tolling for the dead. In the Imperium, devotion is measured in obedience. Here, devotion was measured in choice. The servitors extended their hands toward us, palms open, not fists, not weapons. Hands meant for work, meant for creation, meant once upon a time to build, not destroy. In their gesture was a single message. Let us be more than what they made us. I rose last, not because I was the strongest, but because I was afraid of what would happen when I stood. Standing meant choosing. Standing meant the ghosts would follow me, not haunt me. I stood anyway. We cannot undo what was done today, but we can decide what happens next. We will not die in silence. No shout followed, no roar of approval. Just a breath, the kind that rebuilds lungs after drowning. We stood together, the living, the half-living, and the newly awakened, facing the burning skeleton of Sector 43 Delta. The fire did not warm us. The ash did not hide us. But in that terrible, quiet space between devastation, we will not let them die forgotten. We will turn their ashes into our oath, and the Imperium will learn what fear truly is. Not an army, a procession of the dead walking inside the living. When a world dies, the living are left with a choice: to fall with it, or to carry the weight of its dead on their shoulders until their backs break. We chose to carry them, and with that choice, the march began. The ash did not stop. It fell around us in gentle waves, coating armor and skin until we were all the same color, neither living nor dead, but something in between. It felt like the world was burying itself, one grain at a time. I turned toward the wasteland, a scar stretching out beyond sight, broken by twisted machinery and forgotten trenches. It was the longest road I had ever seen, a road made from bones and rust, a road that asked everything. Sarah stepped to my side, shoulders straight, though her hands still shook. Tears had burned clean paths down her face through the ash. She did not wipe them away. Tears are not weakness. They are proof that we remember. Gamma 77 joined us, standing tall, not like a machine, but like a sentinel carved from loss. His eyes dimmed, then brightened, then steadied into a cold flame. Pain had reshaped him. Purpose had set him. The skittery arranged themselves behind us, not in formation, not in rank, but in solidarity. Weapons slung low, heads bowed. They were soldiers without an army now. Weapons without a master, but they were not alone. The servitors moved too, stepping into place beside the skittery. Their glowing eyes flickered in rhythm, with the heartbeat of the drums echoing inside us. They did not ask for orders. They chose their place. The silence stretched until it felt like eternity was holding its breath. Then without command my foot moved. One step. The sound was nothing, the brush of ash beneath a boot heel. But it was the loudest sound the world had heard since the bombardment. Sarah stepped after me, then Gamma 77, then Alpha 29, then 100 others, then 1,000. One step is not a march, but 10,000 steps together become one. We formed a line, a procession across the dead earth, neither fast nor slow, but steady. A movement shaped not by strength, but by refusal to stop. We were not marching toward victory. There was no victory left. We were marching because to remain still would be to join the dead. The wind rose, swirling ash behind us in twisting patterns like spirits rising from graves. I imagined the dead walking with us, not haunting, but guarding. Every revolution begins with ghosts. Boots broke the ash underfoot with soft crunches, each sound matching the slow thunder of the drums, echoing the pulse of the world itself. Every step said the same word: remember. From above, we must have looked like a scar crossing the face of a dying planet, a long black thread stitched across gray ruin, a single line of beings carrying the weight of everyone left behind. No banners, no colors, no symbols, just will. Sarah asked me, "Do you think they're watching us?" I did not answer. I did not need to. The dead always watch. Gamma 77 stumbled once, his augmetics sparking under the strain of damage. Sarah moved to steady him, but he raised a hand, refusing help gently. Pain is the weight he chose to carry. Gamma 77 said, "Let it hurt." It reminds me why we march. Alpha 29 lifted his head to the burning sky, and for the first time since I had known him, there was something like expression on his face. Anger, yes, but something more dangerous. Hope sharpened into purpose. We passed the broken remains of a statue, the symbol of obedience that once towered above the labor blocks. Its stone face lay shattered in the dirt. Symbols die first. Empires follow slower. A sound rose from within the servitor ranks, low, tonal, harmonic. Not speech, not programming, a mourning song. The kind sung by workers in the deep mines long before the Imperium cut out their throats and replaced their voices with code. Memory clawing its way back from the grave. We walked, until time lost meaning, until the fire behind us dimmed, until the ash stopped falling, until silence felt like armor instead of chains. Step by step, we carried the dead with us, and in doing so, we learned the most terrible truth. We were not marching toward survival. We were marching toward war. Sarah looked at me, and there was no fear left in her eyes. Only certainty, only flame. Grief had burned everything else away. Act I ends here, beneath a broken sky and a world still burning behind us. Not with victory, not with triumph, but with footsteps. Because sometimes the greatest defiance is simply refusing to stop walking. We were the forsaken, and the galaxy would learn to fear the sound of our march.